weekend. Our F1 correspondent James Allen's been speaking exclusively to Red Bull Chief Technical Director Adrian Newey, possibly the most valuable person in Formula One, including all of the drivers. Now, Gary Anderson, our very own technical guru, how important is Adrian Newey to Formula One?
Very important, and obviously extremely important to Red Bull. He's one of the mainstays there. He's a man that comes with ideas. He gets his team of people working on them. He has a very high ability to read through the regulations and find the loopholes, I think you might call it. And that's very important, because if you built a car directly to the regulations, if you read them and built a Formula One car, you wouldn't be as quick as a Mauritia. What you've got to do is look at the openings. It's there, and Red Bull have been very, very good at that. They got caught out in 2009 with a double diffuser that a couple of other teams found, and Adrian didn't find. And to be honest, I think that sort of fired him up again to look very deep, which is what he does. So it's fantastic job, excellent. I think it's 22 years he's been at the top now, so a long time of a great record.
So just to clarify, not cheating, finding loopholes? Yeah,
finding loopholes. I mean, the regulations can only be written to a certain level. The FIA have to govern the sport, but the way the regulations are written, you've got to read them thousands of times to find that opening, that opportunity to exploit something completely within the rules. It's just a matter of recognising it, recognising if it can give the car performance, and then exploiting it to the best possible.
So, over the next 20 minutes, we'll hear from the likes of Christian Horner, Ross Brawn, Mark Webber and Sebastian Vettel on a man who has masterminded a Red Bull car that can win on all manner of circuits, from Malaysia to Singapore.
I look out of my commentary box window, I look down on Sebastian Vettel as he crosses the line, and fireworks erupt all the way down the pit straight. A massive hug from Christian Horner to the technical genius behind this team, Adrian Newey.
Adrian's a remarkable guy. The longevity that he's had in his career, the skill that he has as a designer, the creativity that he has almost like an artist, and the passion that he has for the sport are incredible. But more than that, he's a genuinely very, very nice human being.
Adrian's my nemesis, but I have a huge respect for Adrian. He's very talented, very competitive. Clearly is an iconic character in Formula One. He's done some great cars and he's won some great championships.
The checkered flag waves, the Union Jacks wave. Nigel Mansell is motor racing champion of the world.
He's very passionate about racing. He loves cars. Yeah, he's very ambitious.
He is a 3 times world champion at the age of 25. An absolutely amazing achievement.
He motivates the team not by big speeches, but by actions.
And Alain Prost is the 1993 Formula One world champion.
The best car designer ever. Very, very special guy.
Adrian Newey, OBE, is often described as the most valuable man in Formula One, but he's not a driver. He's an engineer, and more importantly, a design engineer. His designs for Williams, McLaren and recently Red Bull Racing have won over 100 Grand Prix and 17 World Championships for drivers and constructors, including the last 3 years straight. He's the Alex Ferguson of Formula One engineering bosses, if you like. But he had problems at school and he got fired from his first big Formula One job. He rarely gives interviews, but he's agreed to let 5 Live into the Red Bull motorhome to discuss his remarkable career. And Adrian, thank you very much for making the time. We have to start with the question that so many people ask all the time. In Formula One, how much of success is down to the car and how much is down to the driver?
Well, first of all, hello everybody. Car versus driver, I think very difficult to put percentages on. For me, what's fascinating about motor racing in general, and particularly Formula One, is it is the ultimate blend of sportsman, the driver, and the machine, the car. If you look elsewhere, with the possible exception of America's Cup yachting, there really isn't a parallel outside the motor racing umbrella where you've got that complete interdependency of sportsman and machine.
I've known you many, many years, and I've seen you in many moments of your career, and I've known a lot of drivers as well, and there's a look in the eyes of competitive racing drivers, this sort of rage to compete, and you have that look in your eyes as well. You are probably the most competitive person I think I've ever met.
Yes, Frank always used to say that I was more competitive than his drivers, which I kind of used to get upset about initially. I thought, it's a bit unfair. But I guess I've come to terms with that. I am competitive. I kind of can't help but take it personally, which is obviously very satisfying when it's going well. It can be quite depressing when it's not going so well.
Were you always like that? Were you like that as a child? Did you always have to win at everything?
No, not at all. I was very average at sports at school. I guess I wanted to do well at university, mainly because I wanted to be able to try and get into motor racing. My goal, really, it sounds a bit dull, but I guess my ambition right from the age of probably 8 or 10 was to be a designer in motor racing. And really, as I got into my late teens and 20s, really worked hard to try and achieve that goal. And then as I became responsible for the design or the performance of cars, then that sort of competitive instinct, I guess, just grew and grew.
I wonder how much of that came out of your experiences when you were young, because you went to school, I believe you were at the school at the same time as Jeremy Clarkson, and you managed to get yourself, not expelled exactly, but what happened?
I was asked to leave, which I guess, I think Jeremy had the same distinction from Repton. It was a very Dickensian public school, boys' public school. I must admit I didn't particularly enjoy it, if I'm honest. As I said, I wasn't particularly good at sports. I enjoyed art, I enjoyed doodling racing cars, that was my main hobby. And I just found it very restrictive. I was asked to leave after O-levels, GCSEs as they would now be called. What actually happened was there was an end-of-term pop concert held in this, I think it was 11th century building, which was very historic, complete with its stained glass window that survived Cromwell and all sorts of other things. And the school was very proud of this window. The roadie had his mixers in the middle of the auditorium. Anyway, towards the end of the concert, he went off to relieve himself, I guess. So yours truly jumped the controls, slid all the sliders to max, just at the time that the headmaster came in to see what the hell was going on. But unfortunately, then they found that the stained glass window in the morning, fairly large parts of it had fallen out, so I got the rap for that and was asked to leave.
So you literally blew the windows out of it. And it may surprise people, I guess, when they look at you. You are, worldwide regarded as a pioneer, an innovator, an engineer, to realise that you don't actually have any A-levels.
After that demise from Repton, then I went to the local technical college in Leamington Spa. I did what was called an OND, an Ordinary National Diploma in Technology, which was actually a very good little course. Had a high practical content, which appealed to me because I like using my hands. The big downside was the maths content was very weak. Plus, I actually almost failed the end of year and the first year in OND because I went a bit crazy after Repton. I suddenly discovered motorbikes and girls were suddenly on the horizon, which was definitely a taboo in Repton.
There's a bit of a pattern emerging here. There's a wild man inside this technical genius.
Yeah, I was a bit of a wild teenager, I have to admit. So I did go off the rails when I was 17. But it gave me a good shock. So second year I got my act together and settled down.
He seems to be able to encapsulate what drivers are asking for, what they're requiring from the car, together with wind tunnel numbers and mechanical numbers and simulations, and be able to have a clear vision of what he's looking to achieve.
He's also changed the rule book because they have to change the rules really for his capacity, constantly changing things every year to keep him suppressed.
People in our business, in our peer group, they bandy the word genius around an awful lot and may apply it to you with all the success that you've had. But what, to your mind, is genius, and who do you consider genius?
Crikey, what does it mean? I don't know. I can only talk for myself, and my, if you like, modus operandi is to concentrate on the areas I feel I hopefully reasonably good at and can contribute, which is on the performance of the car. What I try to avoid is the managerial side. I try to delegate that, and let's say some of the BS that goes with Formula One, which could be awfully time consuming if you don't try to avoid it.
Where do you get your ideas from? You're the only guy who still uses a pencil in the early stages rather than sophisticated computers to design the cars. But do you get your ideas in the shower? Do you get it when you're walking the dog? Or is it only in that kind of racing environment when you've got a load of other people staring at you looking for the clues that you get your ideas?
Very varied. Sometimes it is in the shower, literally. I do find that sometimes ideas just kind of pop up. I think that the brain's an amazing thing, and the way I try to work is to consider various problems around the car, absorb them, and if I get stuck, walk away from it, go and do something else, get involved in a different area, and quite often subconsciously the brain seems to be working away and an idea will pop up and then you come back to it. Other times it's simply hard graft. It's looking at the problems in all sorts of ways. Probably the easiest one is the old 90% perspiration, 10% inspiration.
Of course, it's a people business, and you've worked with many great drivers. You think of Prost, Mansell, Senna, of course. Now you're working with Sebastian Vettel. People tend to sort of downgrade Vettel's achievements, if you like, because he's been driving a car, one of your cars, for the last 3 years, which has obviously been very competitive. But how do you evaluate his talent?
I think Sebastian's an absolutely remarkable young man. I think it's completely unfair to try and rank drivers that I've been lucky enough to work with, but Sebastian is outstanding in many ways. First of all, for his years, to have achieved what he's done in that time is remarkable, but his focus, I think, is incredible. Very calm, very focused, bright lad who makes mistakes like all of us, but always learns from them and very rarely makes the same mistake twice. And him and Mark, whilst they've obviously unfortunately had their differences which often get blown up by the media, then they've actually been, from an engineering point of view, very good teammates from our side, because they both contribute in different ways. Mark's very sensitive on the aerodynamics of the car. Sebastian's very sensitive in other areas, tyres, some of the suspension characteristics, so they really have complemented each other over that period.
This is extraordinary stuff, and Vettel comes back again at Webber. This is two teammates fighting for the lead of the Grand Prix in Malaysia.
This is silly, Seb, come on.
It was an awkward moment though, wasn't it, in the Malaysian Grand Prix? You just mentioned it there, when obviously Vettel was supposed to stay behind Webber towards the end. Webber had got in front on merit, and he just overtook him anyway. What do you do in a situation like that? I mean, you're an engineer primarily. Do you stay out of it, or did you get involved? Do you regret that happened?
Well, I was involved on the pit wall very heavily, but I must admit I didn't intend to talk to Sebastian, but because I never normally talk to the drivers nowadays, then I couldn't find the flipping button, so I asked Christian to talk. It's a very tricky one, because in truth it wasn't just Malaysia. Unfortunately, there's been a few incidents stretching back to Turkey, and I think it was 2009 or 10, I can't remember which year now, Brazil at the end of last year, and those things kind of fester a bit, I guess, on both sides. It's like a married couple, really, to me. There's no right or wrong in terms of either direction. It's just one of those things where passions run high and sparks will fly occasionally. So they're both racing drivers. When they're fired up, they're going to do things that perhaps they wouldn't do in the cold light of day.
Stephen Hill wins, and I've got to stop because I've got a lump in my throat.
You've won races, many races, world championships with Williams, with McLaren, and obviously now with Red Bull. Looking around this paddock, there's one obvious omission there, which is the red team, Ferrari. I know you get Ferrari and what it's about because you've been an owner of Ferrari road cars. They've tried to get you many times. Why have you never wanted to go there?
I guess a whole combination of reasons, really. Generally it's been timing, to be perfectly honest. Young children. And then I think I felt kind of in my latter days at McLaren as if I was going a bit stale, to be perfectly honest. I just felt I needed a new challenge, and whilst Ferrari had the job of being available at that time, I don't know if it would have been or not, would have for sure been a challenge. It was still an established team, and I didn't really fancy stepping into that one, because if you do well, you've perpetuated what was already started. If you do badly, then you haven't hacked it. More importantly, I just felt I needed a fresh challenge of kind of being involved in a new team more or less right from the start, and see if I could develop it, or we could develop it, I should say, with all my colleagues at Red Bull, into something that could initially aspire to win races, and then, as it transpired, actually go on to win championships.
The only problem with winning, Adrian, and winning as much as you've done, particularly in the last 3 years with this Red Bull team, is that you must be always looking over your shoulder and wondering who's going to knock you off your perch. So how much are you able to enjoy your racing, or are you always worried that the inspiration will dry up and you'll run out of ideas and someone will build a faster car?
Well, that kind of writer's block thing is actually a real concern, and it does happen from time to time. usually I find in about January, where you kind of put all your ideas into the car that is just about to be released. And I just think, oh, Christ, I don't know what else to do now. I can't think of anything. I've gone stale. And then the merry-go-round starts again, and hopefully the ideas come back in again.
And what do you do to bring them on? Do you go out on your motorbike? Do you listen to some rock music? What does it for you?
I do try to relax, and Formula One can be very much an all-consuming sport. I'm not sure if you call this a sport or a job, I don't know, but anyway, a sport. And it would be very easy to spend silly hours 7 days a week there. So I try to make sure that I do have some free time to spend with my girlfriend, with the kids, go on holiday, whatever. I enjoy doing the odd hobby race.
Because you've done the Le Mans 24 Hours. I mean, you've done quite a lot of racing. You've had some quite big smashes as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I have. I've done the Le Mans 24 Hours, which was an amazing event to do. We kept it on the track and we finished fourth in class.
Does it help you understand drivers better?
Yes, it does. I honestly believe it does, actually. At the base level, in terms of what they go through psychologically, the pressures they face, but also, particularly when they're describing the feelings they get from their car, being able to relate to what they're describing at my sort of lowly amateur level, and then being able to think, okay, how do you now turn that into engineering terms, I do believe is a helpful side to it.
And most of what you've done, as you say, apart from a brief period at McLaren where you went a bit stale, most of what you've done has been fulfilled. You've won world championships with Mansell, with Prost, you won world championships with Damon Hill, Jacques Villeneuve, with Mika Häkkinen, now 3 times in a row with Sebastian Vettel. The one glaring omission there obviously was Ayrton Senna. You only worked with him for a very, very short period of time. In that brief period of time, what did you see? What was so special about him?
There was an aura about him. There was something that's difficult to describe, but he most certainly had a presence. He was very personable in terms of involving you and making you feel as if you're special just when you talk to him. And I think that motivated the people that were at the factory without doubt. In a car, obviously, his results speak for themselves, and I guess one of the things that will always haunt me is the fact that he joined Williams because we had managed to build a decent car for the previous 3 years, and he wanted to be in the team that he thought would build the best car. And unfortunately, that 94 car at the start of the season wasn't a good car. Ayrton's raw talent and determination, he tried to carry that car and make it do things that it really wasn't capable of, and it just seems such a shame and so unfair that he was in that position. And then, of course, by the time we did get the car sorted out, he wasn't with us any longer.
My goodness! I just saw him plunge off to the right. What on earth happened there? I don't know.
What little hair I had fell out at that point, that's for sure. It was extremely difficult, it really was. It was a very dark time for all of us, I think. Damon did a fantastic job of only his second proper year in Formula One. Straight away elevated to team leader in that difficult situation. He did an amazing job. You know, we kind of had 2 choices, which was either stop or dig deep and get on with it. With all the people that we were responsible for, to me the first wasn't, it was the easy option, but it wasn't the proper option, which only left the second option, and that's what we all did. What happened that day, what caused the accident, it still haunts me to this day, I guess. The honest answer, nobody will ever know. The steering column failure, was it cause, or did it happen in the accident? There's no doubt it was cracked. Equally, all the data, all the circuit cameras, the onboard camera from Michael Schumacher's car that was following, none of that appears to be consistent with a steering column failure. The car oversteered initially, and then Ayrton caught that, and only then did it go straight. But the first thing that happened was oversteer, in much the same way as you will sometimes see at a super speedway in the States. The car will lose the rear, the driver will correct, and then it will go straight and hit the outside wall, and that's what happened, which doesn't appear to be consistent with a steering column failure.
So you've lived through so much triumph, tragedy. You're the most successful engineer really in the history of Formula One as a designer. Your career is part of the spine really of modern Formula One. Where do you go from here? You still have the inspiration, you still have the desire when you get out of bed every morning to put one over those Ferraris and put one over those Mercedes week in, week out?
Yes, it's a very good question, one I do sometimes ask myself. The answer is I still really enjoy it. The pressure can be a bit onerous at times, if I'm honest. The hours are long, and as I mentioned earlier, if you're not very careful, it can be quite all-consuming. But it's still a tremendous buzz when it goes well, and that's, I guess, quite addictive. I'm 54. I'm too young to do nothing, but equally at some stage I would like to be involved in something different rather than motor racing. But when that might be and what that might be, I'm afraid I absolutely have no idea.
Final question. Sebastian Vettel already won 3 World Championships with him. You paid a glowing tribute to him early on. Looking pretty good for the 4th one this year. Do you think he can eclipse or match Michael Schumacher's records? Do you want to be part of
that? Well, first of all, I mean, we've got a long, long way to go still. Certainly not taking anything for granted. It can change very quickly. Yes, of course, it would be fantastic if Sebastian could go on to eclipse Michael's record. But that doesn't necessarily define greatness. When we talk about the all-time greats, then the names of Ayrton Senna, Jim Clark, Jackie Stewart, Emerson Fittipaldi, they come up, as well as Michael, of course, and Fangio. All those names jump to mind. Some of them have had, in terms of championships, a fraction of the success of Michael. So there's that intangible thing that defines greatness, which isn't simply results. What Sebastian's very well on the way to doing is establishing himself as one of the all-time greats.
It's a perfect place to end. Adrian Newey, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us.
Thank you very much. Thank you.